Hey everyone, today I want to talk a little bit about how to build a Kyber Crystal containment unit. I saw something like this online. I've never built anything like it in my lifetime, and it seemed like an interesting, fun project, and I adapted it for my use. Basically, I started off with a camping lantern, which looks like this. Maybe a little hard to see, but a pretty generic camping lantern from Amazon. And I turned it into a Kyber Crystal containment unit, which is kind of themed after Rogue One and some of the things that you may have seen on screen there. So how did I make this happen? Well, let me start off by saying that I live in an apartment. So I had to make a number of adaptations for the fact that I can't really use too many power tools and I don't have a lot of space. I also want to kind of apologize in advance for the poor quality of this video. Unfortunately, I don't have a great light source here to help fill things out, but I will do my best to make sure you can see everything whenever possible. Okay, so here's how I did this. First of all, I looked at the lantern and I realized there are a few interesting parts about it. What you'll notice is if I take the lantern and I pull up on it, it lights up. When I bought this, I didn't know that's necessarily how it worked, but the moment you pull it up, it starts to light up. There are also these handles, which you can see here, and there is a base. The base can be removed. It can be unscrewed from the rest of it. Then I started to take this thing apart and try to figure out what I would do with it. It didn't quite work the way that I thought it would. I thought initially what I could do was open this guy up and just kind of put some Kyber crystals in front of this lighting element and call it a day and be done with it. What I wound up having to do was a little bit more of an adaptation. So you may not be able to see this, but there is a light at the base of this containment unit that I can turn on by pushing down the plunger and changing the color. You can see that that's red, green, and blue. Of course, back to off again. So I made a number of adaptations to make this happen. I'll kind of go through how I did it. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how to take this guy apart. First of all, you just pull these little latches off the side, these little handles. This top piece, as you can see here, this actually just screws off. And what you'll find at the top is a single Phillips head screw. And at the bottom, you'll find batteries and 4 more Phillips heads. So I had a lot of issues here. I had to try to figure out what I was going to do with the existing lighting element, how I was going to try to adapt it, and that's when I figured out a kind of unique problem. If you take out these screws, and then what I'm going to do is just pull this piece out. What you'll see is a wire, or 2 wires I should say, coming from the battery pack and feeding through a little hole there in the bottom. And what that leads to is the lighting element. This very long screw going down through the middle of it. As you can see, there's a piece of kind of reflector there that the screw goes down through. This all comes apart. I can take this long screw out. I can pop this piece apart. So these are all separate. So I can pull those apart as much as I'd like and have them be all separate. The outer shield that I have here, I can pull this out too. This comes all the way out. One thing to note, there is a bottom and a top to this. The bottom is slightly wider than the top. So if you want to keep that in order, I would just kind of set it off to the side the way that you found it. And once I pull this out, you can see the bottom shell is just empty, just empty plastic. Then I've got my lighting element. You'll notice, again, the wires go up through, and they come up into this lighting element that kind of unfolds. So how did I deal with this? Well, in my case, I took one look at it. I realized it wasn't necessarily going to serve my purposes, so I cut the wire and I removed it. And I took out this battery pack, I took out this lighting element, and I just stuck with this bottom piece. So how did I provide light into it once I had removed the lighting source? Well, it was actually really straightforward. What I did was I found a puck that I had laying around the house that would light up. It's a little puck that I got from a company called Five Below. This puck fit perfectly into the base of my lantern, and it's a touch interface. So by touching, I'm able to cycle through the various colors. And so that's how, when I plunge the top of this down, I'm able to cycle through the various colors. I can turn it off, I can cycle it through, do whatever I need to do, and that light will come up through the base of the lantern. And my hope was that it would illuminate things, which luckily turned out to be the case. So this little puck that I have here, I had gotten again at a company called Five Below, but you can find these things online very quickly and easily. What I would do is just measure the diameter of your bottom piece and just make sure that whatever you're purchasing is going to fit within that range. There is a double-sided piece of tape that goes onto the bottom as well. And so it's stuck directly to this base. So my next steps at that point were to figure out, once I had that light, what I was going to do with the light. And that's when we came to the Kyber Crystals. I tried some of the Galaxy's Edge Kyber Crystals, and I found really quickly that they were just too large for the types of lantern that I had purchased, and they didn't quite look the way that I wanted them to look. They looked really crowded and just kind of strange, and they didn't stand up in any way that I was happy with. So I started to figure out how I would deal with this problem, and I came up with maybe a unique solution. I went on Amazon and I bought some quartz crystals. These quartz crystals I think were $5 for 10. They're in various sizes and shapes. I just picked out 6 in the sizes that I liked, and then I went about how to color them. How would you color rocks? Well, the best thing that I could come up with is to just use Sharpies. So what you're seeing here, the color that you get, particularly that really brilliant red, that is just a Sharpie marker that produced that color. So I just Sharpied each one of these rocks excessively until I got the color that I wanted. And then I had to figure out how the light was going to come up through these crystals so that they would look nice in their display case. And I had an additional issue, which was, how am I going to anchor them to this base once I've done that? I arrived at using a product called Sugru, which you may have heard of or you may not have heard of, but basically it is a moldable glue. And it did 2 things for me. It allowed me to take this compound and anchor each one of these quartz crystals to the base while also kind of gluing them in place. So this is surprisingly sturdy. Like, I could kind of knock this thing around and these quartz crystals aren't going to fall apart. I needed to make some artistic choices here. So I decided on some Sugru that were in earth colors. You might be able to see this is kind of a brown here. This is kind of a gray, more brown. And I sculpted these to look kind of like rocks. So you may be able to see there that there is kind of a rocky shape, particularly at the base of that red crystal. And I took those and I kind of carved at them, particularly with a needle, just the end of a needle. I used that quite a bit in this project to just kind of scratch things up. Before I went about this, I needed a way to get some holes in the base. I needed a way to get holes in the bottom piece, which we saw here, and have the light come up through so that it would shine through the bottom of the quartz crystals. The way that I did that was actually really straightforward. I took a old soldering iron that I happen to have that's really beat up and really nasty, but still heats up. And I took it, I heated it up, I went out onto the balcony, and then I just equidistant pushed holes through each of these so that the light would come down through. Then what I did was I took each crystal, I shoved it into those holes, and I secured it with some of the sugru, and I molded it the way that I wanted to. My goal was to make each of these look like they came from a different rock, almost like a soil sample or something from the crystal itself. Once I got those into place, I sculpted each of them, and then I let the whole thing set for about a day. Once everything was set up, I could tell that it had a good look to it, but it wasn't quite exactly what I really 100% wanted, so I then followed things up with some paint. I hit some of these kind of dirt formations, these rock formations, with just black acrylic paint. I happen to have some gel stain, as you can see, really breaking the bank here, but basically gel stain looks kind of like a wet, muddy kind of thing and dries kind of that way, so that looked nice. And then I mixed up a little bit of orange as well. I had another problem, which was how do I cover up the large screw that would then be running down through the middle of this lantern. All that I did was I got a pen, I took it apart, and I put it in there, and it fit, and it was the length that I needed to go from here to here. If it's not the length that you need, mine was actually just a little bit too long. You can put a flame to a razor blade and use that heat to just kind of melt through the very end. Just look around at the pens that you happen to have laying around your house. There's a good chance one of them is going to work. Once I had all these pieces, I had to start about painting. Painting is something that I have never done with a project like this. I knew that I needed to make it look beat up. I really wanted it to look lived in, and there were a couple things I was willing to do to make that happen. I had never worked with spray paint before, so when I went to the store, I really didn't know what I was looking for. But I knew that I wanted to have a silver base layer, so I landed on this metallic iron ore paint and primer combination. I painted that in a box. I just literally took a box out on my balcony, put the various plastic pieces down in it, sprayed each one, gave those a couple days to dry and cure. Then once that happened, I took some Vaseline, petroleum jelly, and I just smeared it in the locations that I wanted to have the paint flake off of, that I wanted to have it kind of come apart. As you can see in this big area here, there's a big gash of paint that's gone missing. All that I did for that was I took a little bit of this petroleum jelly, smeared it in that area, and then I painted with, in my case, maybe not the best choice, but something called Shortcuts Hobbycraft paint in the color that I wanted. I sprayed the whole thing down. I let it dry just about as much as I wanted it to, and then I took basically a cloth and I just wiped along these painted sides to wipe away the paint in the area that the petroleum jelly had coated. So I was able to do that. I pulled that off at the top here as well, pulled each of those pieces down. And then I went about some additional weathering. So there were a couple things that I did for my weathering. I went and cut on my Cricut machine first this Tarkin Initiative logo. This is a 1-inch sticker. This basically means 6, and I wanted that to designate that there were 6 Kyber crystals in this containment chamber. And I printed that out, slapped it on here, and then started to weather it. If you don't have a Cricut machine, don't worry about it. You can probably get something like this off the internet, or whatever logo it is you might want to. Something like this to kind of maybe hopefully give it a little bit of a lived-in look. Then I took my needle and I put some scratches on it, as you can see here, because I wanted all the paint to kind of grab all these locations around the bottom and the edge and things like that. Then I started my weathering process, and the weathering was kind of unique. I never learned how to do this, so this is just how I did it. But I took these paints, and I'll go through these real quick. I took black, orange, and red, and I mixed those together until I got kind of a muddy brownish color. And I mixed that with some water until it quite literally just looked like a little palette of mud. And then I took that and I really generously applied it all over. I kind of just painted it in around here, and it looked like it was covered in mud. And then I took my cloth and I just kind of wiped it away in most of those areas. And so what you see here, this is the remaining mud that is just that brown paint. Then I wanted some additional weathering. I wanted it to look really kind of beat. And as you can see, there's a lot of like modeling here on the sides and things like that. I wanted it to look handled like it had sat in a dumpster for a really long time. So for that, all that I did was I took some black paint. I put a single drop of it in my hand. I just patted that out in my hands, and then I took it and just held the lantern in all different locations. You'll notice I smeared some of the paint up here on the glass as well to give it a kind of a lived-in look. Then I did the same thing with this kind of light blue color to kind of give it a look as though some colors had maybe rubbed off on it from other things in the dump. You can kind of see some of that in here. It almost is like the paint has kind of powdered from being pummeled in its time in the dirt and soil. And then here at the top, where we've got this look of kind of modeling or rust, what I did for that was I just put a dab of the orange, just straight orange, in my hand, just one drop in my hand, and I went through and I patted it down all through the top. And so that gives you that kind of like rind that really orange rust gives you. And I put those in all the places that I wanted it to be, stained this a little bit with that orange, and then I put the whole thing together and it was good to go. One last piece I did here was that I slapped some stickers here on the little nubs on either place. These are, I think, like bejeweled stickers or something like that. I got these at a craft store. Very simple and easy to apply. A lot of people put screws or something like that in those spots. But that is how I did it. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have them. I'll have the links below in the description. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope that whatever you create looks great and you like it.